Western Middle School Wildcats. It is a lovely typhoon day today, and I am grateful that today we did not lose electricity as normally, so I can make this video for you of reading the story. So in case some of you are unable to log in to the online book or the PDF, some of you are having difficulty finding the right page on the PDF, so I'm going to read it and you can follow along. But here is the pathway to the PDF. So second week, and we're reading the first day of school, pages 271 through 276, and like I said, the scanner for some reason always makes the first one upside down. I do not know how to fix that. It went right to it, but as you can see, it'll usually start you here, but if you just scroll down and the page numbers are right there, like 253, and you go down to 271. Alright. First day of school. Alright, so I'm just going to start reading it. Background. In 1954, United States Supreme Court ruled that segregation in public schools, the practice of having separate but equal schools for whites and blacks, was unconstitutional. This decision meant that schools had to begin integrating students at all levels. School children, particularly in the southern United States, prepared to face the anger and hatred and often violence of those who opposed this policy. In 1958, in the midst of this difficult time, R.V. Cassill, 1919 to 2002, wrote this story. Okie dokie. So, first day of school, short story by R.V. Cassill. Setting purpose. As you read, pay close attention to the interactions of the Hawkins family and the clues that indicate what the significance about this first day of school is. 13 bubbles floated in the milk. Their pearl-transparent hemispheres gleamed like souvenirs of the summer days just past, rich with blue reflections of the sky and shadowy greens. John Hawkins jabbed the bubble closest to him with his spoon, and it disappeared without a ripple. On the white surface there was no mark of where it had been. "Stop tooling that oatmeal and eat it," his mother said. She glanced meaningful at the clock on the varnished cupboard. She nodded a heavy, emphatic affirmation. That now the clock was boss. Summer was over, when the gracious oncoming of morning light and the stir of early breezes promised that time was a luxury. "Audrey's not even down yet," he said. "Audrey'll be down. You think she's taking longer to dress because she wants to look nice today? She wants to look neat." "What I was thinking," he said slowly, "was that maybe she didn't feel like going today, didn't feel exactly like it. Of course she'll go. I meant, she might not want to go until tomorrow, maybe, until we see what happens." "Nothing's going to happen," Mother said. "I know there isn't, but what if it did?" Again John swirled the tip of his spoon in the milk. It was like riding on a surface that would keep no mark. "Eat and be quiet. Audrey's comin', so let's stop this here kind of talk." He heard the tap of the heels on the stairs, and his sister came down into the kitchen. She looked fresh and cool in her white dress. Her lids looked heavy. She must have slept all right. And for this, John felt both envy and a faint resentment. He had not really slept since midnight. The heavy traffic in town, the long wails of horns as someone raced in on the U.S. highway, holding the horn button down, and the restless murmur, like the sound of a celebration down in the courthouse square, had kept him awake after that. Each time a car had passed their house, his breath had gone tight and sluggish. It was better to stay awake and ready, he had told himself, than to be caught asleep. "Daddy gone?" Audrey asked softly as she took her place across the table from her brother. "He's been gone an hour," their mother answered. "You know what time he has to be at the mine." "She means did he go to work today," John said. His voice had risen impatiently. He met his mother's stout gaze in a staring contest, trying to make her admit at least some flicker of expression that today was different from any other day. "I thought he might be down at Reverend Specker's," John said. "Cal's father and Bonnie's and some of the others are going to be there to wait and see. Maybe, his mother smiled. If so, the smile was so faint that she could not be sure. You know your father isn't much of a hand at waiting, she said. Eat. It's 8:15. As he spooned the warm oatmeal into his mouth, he heard the rain crow calling again from the trees beyond the railroad embankment. He had heard it since the first light came before dawn, and he had thought, maybe the bird knows it's going to rain after all. He hoped it would. They won't come out in the rain after all, he thought. Not so many of them, at least. He could wear a raincoat. A raincoat might help him feel more disguised, more protected on the walk to school. It would be sort of a disguise, at least. But since the dawn, oops, I scrolled too far. But since the dawn sun had lain across the green Kentucky trees and roof of town like a clean, hard fire, the sky was as clear as a fresh-washed window glass. The rain crow was wrong about the weather, and still, John thought, its lamenting, repeated call must mean something. His mother and Audrey were talking about the groceries she was to bring when she came home from school at lunchtime. A 5-pound bag of sugar, a fresh pineapple, a pound of butter. Listen, John said. Downtown the sound of siren had begun. A volley of automobile horns broke around as if they meant to drown it out. Listen to them. It's only the National Guard. I scrolled too far again. It's only the National Guard, I expect, his mother said calmly. They came in early this morning before light, and it may be some foolish kids honking at them, the way they would. Audrey, if Henry doesn't have a good-looking roast, why, then let it go, and I'll walk out to Weaver's this afternoon and get one there. I wanted to have something a little bit special for our dinner tonight. So John thought she wasn't sleeping last night either. Someone had come stealthily to the house to bring his parents word about the National Guard. That meant they knew about the others who had come into town, too. Maybe all through the night there had been a swift passage of messengers through the neighborhood and a whispering of information that his mother meant to keep from him. Your folks told you, he reflected bitterly, that nothing is better than knowing whatever there is in the world to be known. That was why you had to be one of the half-dozen kids out of some 900 colored of school age who were going today to start classes at Joseph P. Gilmore High instead of Webster. Knowing and learning the truth were worth so much, they said, and then left it to the hootin' rain crow to tell you that things were worse than everybody had hoped. Somebody had gone wrong, bad enough wrong, so the National Guard had to be called out. It's 8:25, his mother said. Did you get that snap sewed on right, Audrey? As her experienced fingers examined the shoulder of Audrey's dress, they lingered a moment in an involuntary sheltering caress. It's all arranged, she told her children. How you'll walk down to the Baptist church and meet the others there. You know there'll be Reverend Chatter, Reverend Smith, and Mr. Hall to go with you. It may be that the white ministers will go with you, or they may be waiting at school. We don't know, but now you be sure you do not go farther than the Baptist church alone. Carefully, she lifted her hand clear of Audrey's shoulder. John thought, why doesn't she hug her if that's what she wants to do? He pushed away from the table and went out on the front porch. The dazzling sun lay shadowless on the street that swept down towards the Baptist church at the edge of the colored section. The street seemed awful long this morning, the way it had looked when he was little. A chicken was clucking contentedly behind the neighbor's house, feeling the warmth settling itself into the sun-warmed dust. Lucky chicken. He blinked as the sun's glare on the concrete steps leading down the porch. He remembered something else from the time he was little. Once he had kicked Audrey's doll buggy down the same steps. He had done it out of meanness. For some silly reason, he had been mad at her. But as soon as the buggy had started to bump down, he had understood how terrible it was not to be able to run after it and stop it. It had gathered speed at each step, and when it hit the sidewalk, it had spilled over. Audrey's doll had smashed into sharp little pieces on the sidewalk below. His mother had come out of the house to find him crying harder than Audrey. Now you know that when something gets out of your hands, it's in the devil's hands, his mother had explained to him. Did she expect him to forget now? That this was always the way things went to smash when they got out of hand? Again he heard the siren and the hooting, mocking horns from the center of town. Didn't his mother think they could get out of hand? He closed his eyes and seemed to see something like a doll buggy bumping down the steps, those at Joseph P. Gilmore High, and it seemed to him that it was not a doll that was riding down to be smashed. He made up his mind then. He would go today, because he had said he would. Therefore he had to. But he wouldn't go unless Audrey stayed home. That was going to be his condition. His bargaining looked perfect. He would trade them one for one. His mother and Audrey came together on the porch. His mother said, "My stars, I forgot to give you the money for the groceries." She let the screen door bang as she went swiftly back into the house. As soon as they were alone, he took Audrey's bare arm in his hand and pinched hard. "You gotta stay home," he whispered. "Don't you know there's thousands of people down there? Didn't you hear them coming in all night long? You slept, didn't you? All right, you can hear them now. Tell her you're sick. She won't expect you to go if you're sick. I'll knock you down. I'll smash you if you don't tell her that." He bared his teeth and twisted his nails into the skin of her arm. "Hear them horns?" he hissed. He forced her halfway to her knees with the strength of his fear and rage. They swayed there, locked for a minute. Her knee dropped onto the porch floor. She lowered her eyes. He thought he had won. But she was saying something in spite of himself, and in spite of himself, he listened to an almost whispered refusal. "Don't you know anything? Don't you know it's harder for them than us? Don't you know Daddy didn't go to the mine this morning? They laid him off on account of us. They told him not to come if we went to school." Uncertainly, he relaxed his grip. "How do you know all that?" "I listened," she said, her eyes lit with a sudden spark that seemed to come from their absolute brown depths. "But I don't let on all I know the way you do. I'm not a—" Her last word sunk so low that he could not exactly hear it. But if this ear missed it, his understanding caught it, and he knew she had said coward. He let her get up. She was standing beside him, serene and prim, when her mother came out on the porch again. "Here, child," her mother said to Audrey, counting the dollar bills in her hand. "There's 6, and I guess it'll be all right if you have some left if you and your brother get yourselves a cone to lick on the way home." John was not looking at his sister then. He was already turning to face the shadowless street. But he heard the unmistakable poised amusement of her voice when she said, "Ma, don't you know we're a little too old for that?" "Yes, you are," their mother said. "Seems I had forgotten that." They were too old to take each other's hands either, as they went down the steps of their home and into the street. As they turned to the right, facing the sun, they had heard the chattering of a tank's tread on the pavement by the school. A voice too distant to be understood brawled a military command. There were horns again, and a crescendo of boos. Behind them they had heard their mother call something. It was lost in the general racket. "What?" John called back to her. "What?" She had followed them out as far as the sidewalk, but not past the gate. As they hesitated to listen, she put her hands to either side of their mouth to call to them, and the words she had so often used when she let them go away from home. Behave yourselves," she said. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you were able to enjoy the story, and there's a lot of good layers to it, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts next class.